Welcome to La Verdad Duele. What is that? The truth. The truth that hurts. Even though we're not intending to hurt anybody's feelings, we know that we may share information that many people have strong opinions on. This is solely based on the fact that we love sharing information and we love passing down knowledge. And this podcast is all about that. And we hope you can enjoy that. Let's get to it. Welcome, Puyaka Puyaka. I'm your host, Tijani Musa. Today in the studio, I have a special guest who's about to educate us, who's about to provide us some insights on social consciousness education. The guest is Dennis Febo. Dennis is Boricua, native of Brooklyn, New York. In 2011, he founded Guazabara Insight LLC, a health and educational services provider who assists the underserved portions of our community. In contract with the correctional system, Dennis has worked with thousands of inmates and juvenile detainees, preparing them for the outside world by teaching cultural and social consciousness education. Dennis is a community activist and is currently spearheading the Amend the 13th movement in New Jersey and across the U.S. to free our Constitution from the language of slavery and involuntary servitude. Mr. Febo is also an artist, vocalist, and a father of 5. Dennis Febo, welcome to the studio.
Puyaka, Puyaka.
My man. All right. So I love that energy. And so I'm just going to turn this over to you and you can start the enlightening, the educational piece and the information you're about to instill into the fans of La Verdad Duele and the people that are listening to the podcast. Again, thank you so much for being here and you can take the mic.
All right. Thank you, my brother. Thank you for having me, for inviting me, and to give a platform to share a message and a call to action for our people, not just here around the world. We are a global people, and we need to come together in order to overcome a lot of the ills that inflict us today. So again, my name is Dennis Febo. I'm the founder and CEO of Guasabara Insights LLC. Guasabara means warrior. We're a health and educational services provider whose goal is to raise social consciousness and uplift communities, and we do so through the dissemination of a curriculum that I wrote called Cultural and Social Consciousness Education. I implemented this curriculum inside of correctional facilities in New Jersey and working with juvenile detention centers and at-risk youth throughout our urban areas, mainly for the purposes of violence prevention, but also to steer our youth who didn't have the opportunities that a lot of us had into the right direction. I've serviced thousands of clients in the past 9 years. And out of all the experiences that I've had with each individual, I've gotten to learn a lot of what inflicts us, how we feel, the barriers that we all collectively face as a people. And the more I kept doing, the more I kept interacting with different, state level, county level, city levels, I started to realize that as an educated man and a man of color and a man that honors his ancestry and his people, that I needed to enact who I was. And I know that's very hard, especially for youth, because we grow up in a society that doesn't really instill in us how worthy we are, how powerful we are, and how much our voice matters and how much our actions matter. So for me as a person out on the streets and working with all this population, I didn't just come to this agreement that this is what I was going to do. My mother had me at 16 years old. She had 5 children. She did a lot of it on her own. My father left us when I was around 9 years old. I did rekindle a relationship with him, but he ended up committing suicide in 2008 due to his addiction to drugs. So I did grow up in the circumstances. We were poor. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to worry about where we're going to live. I know what it's like to be in a place and not be accepted because of what I look like or what I talk like. So having all those experiences, for many of us, it knocks us down. We feel low. We feel unworthy. But, I still had a strong faith in general, just spiritually, my connection to the universe and to God. And I always stayed strong throughout my challenges as a youth. And I did have some people around me that consistently told me how important education was. And I did focus on that. I did take a lot of my anger and my frustration and the times that people told me I couldn't be anything, and I used that anger and I proved them wrong. Now a poor little kid from Brooklyn, New York, Puerto Rican, growing up in Puerto Rico and in Brooklyn, which if I saw myself at 16, I would never imagine that I'm at where I'm at today. Now I'm going to be 38 years old tomorrow. And if I look back at my life, I feel like I've lived 10 lives. But a lot of it and most of my progress and my success and the success of my company and how many people we've been able to reach really just had to do with my ability to surrender my body, my mind, and my spirit to what I knew needed to get done. And in that, our heart tells us we know what's right. We know what we need to do. We know what moves us, especially when we're coming from a position of empathy. So through all that, seeing the structures in place and seeing how government responds to the needs of people, what they prioritize, how our people respond, how we identify ourselves. I really saw a big problem with that. I get it from my father. I think my father was always proud of being Boricua, and the way he used to say, like, I'm Boricua, like there was so much pride. And you see us Puerto Ricans in the parades on TV. We go hard with our identity.
For sure.
But when somebody stopped me one day and said, "What does that mean?" Right? And I was like, "What do you mean? What does that mean? What does Puerto Rico mean?" And I never stopped. I never stopped to think about that. I said, "Rich port." But I was like, I don't know any rich Puerto Ricans. Who is this port? And isn't a port a place of entry and departure? That's my island. So when you start to dig and connect the history, you start to see, oh, they called it that, right? My ancestors didn't call it that. The invaders, the people who conquered called it that. And we live this split identity. And as a quote unquote Puerto Rican, we're also Boricua, right? We're also American citizens and second class citizens at that. We can't vote for the president who can send us into war at the snap of a finger. So growing up with all of that and having that, being able to tie my history, and I did do a lot. I did my undergrad. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a biologist. And when I started reading about the institutions of slavery and the real history of this country, I was so impacted by the information. There's nothing else I could think, move, or talk about. Like I felt like my role was to help in that. And while it's taken me a lot of years of study, I do now have a master's degree. I'm a professor at NJCU, New Jersey City University. Even up until today, because I never stopped studying, I still always learn something new. But I wanted to be able to say if when I left this earth plane, that I actually did something, right? I read about so many heroes in our story, and I always looked up to them, but I always thought to myself, what if I could do that too? And it's not for ego. It's not to shine. I just want to say, when I die, I want to hold my head high. And I want my family to hold their head high because they know I came here and I contributed to this earth. And the tie that I have to my ancestry, I got to travel to Cuba. I lived there for 4 months. I went to the University of Havana. And I noticed here in the States, there was a big divide between what we call, quote unquote, Latino and quote unquote Black. And I'll say why I say quote unquote. But when I saw that divide, it bothered me because I had friends, my best friends were Black Dominicans, right? And then the Black Dominicans weren't getting accepted by U.S. Blacks. But I was like, but don't y'all just both speak a different language of the colonizer? Because people stop me and they'll say, hey, meet me over by the Spanish store. Spanish Poppy from the corner? So I tell people now, if you call me Spanish, I get to call you English.
Right.
Because Spanish is not my identity. That's the language that I speak. Myself falo português. Eu morei no Brasil. A gente não sabe que in Brazil que era Boricua. But at the end of the day, I don't say I'm Brazilian or Portuguese just because I could speak the language.
Right.
Okay, so I started questioning. You start looking at census data and how they calculate who we are. We didn't pick those boxes. We didn't pick those names. They called us Black. They called us brown. They called us Negroes. They called us Hispanics and Latins. We didn't come up with those names. We always had names. And they were powerful names. And they tie us to the law of this land because we are indigenous to this land. They got us thinking that we live in a foreign land, like we're a foreign entity in the land of our own ancestors. And that's why we don't hold our head high. And they do very well in hiding information. I mean, even now when they talk about the institution of slavery, they almost try to make it sound like people were happy to work. So when we talk about how they pitch the story to our youth, and I always give this example, I was speaking at an elementary school. It was a K through 8 school. and I had them all say out loud, "Black is beautiful. My skin is beautiful." And then look to the person next to you, say, "Your skin is beautiful." And everybody did it. And I said, "Now, somebody tell me, when you hear the word black, what does it mean?" And the little kindergartner, little beautiful girl, stood up and she said, "Slavery."
Wow.
And it broke me to hear that. She was so beautiful. Like, I have children, you know, and I couldn't ever imagine to hear my own child say that they associate who they are to that ugly concept.
Right.
And then when we look at the history of Black and African people in the world, slavery was only 2% of the time of history. So for us to reference ourselves from that point, and that we consistently, now here in the US, we do it very consistently to each other. We keep reinforcing these notions, but we don't stop to ask what they mean, right? So I started to take on trying to figure out how to neutralize these arguments because they become very circular, and they get bigger and people get angry, and then they shut down, and then nothing happens, right? And we see that when you want to address a white audience about white privilege, they don't want to hear it, right? Why? Because first off, when I've stood up and I've spoke to thousands of people around the country, I get booked to speak in universities and colleges around the country. And I also do professional development for the staff of those institutions. I do professional development and consulting for educational districts here in Jersey, New York, Connecticut. And I've basically been able to see where they stand on how to be able to create an environment. Because my goal is the youth. If they get it right, we could eliminate racism and structural oppression in a generation or two.
Absolutely.
But they keep preventing it from going down the line. So when you ask a little Black girl, what does black mean? And she says slavery, that's how you know they got us. Because slavery was mental before it was physical. They got to get you to believe. And for those that didn't believe, they would get beaten until what they called their spirit broke, which meant that they broke the mind. So in our mind is our structure. In our mind is how we identify. The word identity, if you break that word apart, is id and entity. The id is your unconscious process, right? So whatever I put in there is what my body's going to do automatically, right? And it's a very good self-defense mechanism. It protects us, it guides us. But a lot of us don't understand how these processes work. When I take a word and I call myself by that word, it has an impact on my body. Now, if I said, I'm stupid, and I keep saying that to every response, or eventually I'm going to keep positioning myself where I don't practice it or don't try to have an experience, therefore I will never learn. So by the mere even joking of being stupid, is any word that we use to describe ourselves, to speak of ourselves, all of those words should always be positive. You are a spiritual being and a human experience. You are a child of God. There is nothing low or less or beneath about you. And when every single one of us really understands and enacts that, there's nothing that couldn't stop us. And our children are already born this way. They are already critical thinkers. They already ask the main question, why? It's us, the adults, that have to start figuring out how we're going to actually really define. I started to think about it, racism and children. When I'm standing in an audience full of 10-year-old white children, is that how I'm going to talk to them? White children, or are they children?
Right.
And I have babies. My family has, because we're Puerto Rican and we're a big mixture, we have a lot of green and blue eyes. My daughter came out with blue eyes. And I'll be in environments when I'm talking about Black empowerment and somebody be like, yeah, them blue-eyed devils. I'm like, my daughter got blue eyes. See, because we start getting up on what we call phenotypic aspect of our identity, whereas we think that we are our skin color. We think we are our hair and our eye color. That's ridiculous. Out of all you are as a human being, out of all you are as a spiritual being, that's what we go to first, our skin. When you confront people of color with the question, what are you? Here in the US, they will usually respond with their color. When you ask white people, what are you? They will usually respond with an adjective. People of color are preoccupied with being of color or being, quote unquote, a minority because of the fact that it's been instilled in us for generations, right? And we keep following the track and nobody turns around and says, wait a minute, but aren't you guys counting white Hispanics as part of white? When I look at the census data, so you said here in Hudson County, New Jersey, white people are 64%, but when I take out white Hispanic, it's only 19. So, and we're the minority, and we keep walking around saying it. And when you say that word, it has an effect on your body. You subconsciously believe believe that you don't have enough voice and enough power. I said I have a TED talk on YouTube if anybody wants to watch. It's called The Ism of Race. I have read Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink when he has his whole chapter on race and performance and how he did a study with basically did a study with a group of African American people, same academic qualifications. One group, they gave them a test, an academic exam that they all had the same probability of passing, and they got a certain score. And then they gave it to the other group, but they asked them, "Are you black? Yes or no?" And they all circled yes, and they scored 50% lower. That blew my mind because I started to think back all the times I was in a classroom because I had a fitted on and a North Face and Tim's because I'm from Brooklyn and that's how we dress. That every time I raised my hand, they wouldn't pick on me. Or maybe this explains why the cops would always pull me over, or why I was always getting beat up and getting fake charges put on me by police officers. I started to think about how does identity really play into the concept of law? Because if I say that I am an indigenous person of this land and I have proof that I am, and I commit a crime on indigenous territory, the federal government can't touch me, neither can the state government. I have a different jurisdiction. If I am an addict and I use drugs, I could get butt naked, run down the street, light a tree on fire, scream at the top of my lungs, get tackled by the cops, go in front of a judge, and I'm going to go in front of a different judge, and I'm going to have a different take at law under jurisdiction because I claim that I'm an addict. Addict is a diagnosis and title. It is a status. An addict cannot speak for himself or herself. They need somebody to do it for them. When they colonized Puerto Rico and Cuba and they came in and established their own colonial government, their reasoning was, as so says their own law of the land, was because we were too juvenile of mind to be able to govern ourselves. So now we're having a play on psychology, identity, and law. And these things are very important because it is law that establishes our society and the way we behave and interact with each other. And if a law is making it that somebody's being oppressed, then it is the duty of those of us that are of the oppressed class that have had the luck of gaining some access to resource and knowledge and people that loved us around us. It is our goal and our fight to have to bridge these two worlds together because I've traveled the world. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of poverty. In a world that produces 1.5 times more food than we can consume, in a world of abundance, how is there hunger? In a world that provides everything that we need, why don't we have what we need? And when you start to dig deep, it's because of greed, because of racism, because people hold on to stupid notions of who they think they are and their own identity. But when I question these people about whiteness, you know what they say to me? They don't know. They don't know what it means. I say, what is a Caucasian? Most of them say they don't know. So what are you talking about supremacy? What are you talking about referencing of colors? And why do we have to consistently have to go to that conversation in order to have an agenda of who we are as a people? What I suggest is for everyone to change their language and use the concept of melanin. Why? Because you have to understand melanin in respect to economy. The only reason black people and brown people were subjected to this is because we could spend more time in the sun than people who don't have melanin. So when we had an agricultural economy, white people could not stand outside all day cutting sugarcane or picking cotton. It was us that did that. And they needed our bodies in order to do so. And they restricted our bodies and kept them channeled towards that line of work and didn't allow us access to develop our mind. That's been the battle, right? So how do we move and control the narrative? By saying melanated. Why? Because now I could get rid of the black versus brown or African American versus black. What other people in the world argue consistently about what their name is? Hispanics and Latinos and blacks and we say you can't put Jamaicans, Africans, blacks from and so I could say black from Chicago, LA, Louisiana, and New York are completely different cultures. Right? And you put all those people in a room and you say, okay, what is black? And all you're going to get is an argument because we reference the identity from skin color to culture. And we know that that's not the truth. The skin color doesn't determine your culture. You do. Somebody with dark skin could love heavy metal and goth or dance to ballet and classical music. Those things are considered culturally Anglo. And just because we participate in them doesn't make us less black. Some people would try to even argue that it does. But no one person on this earth, not one individual on this earth could ever tell you who you are. Nobody. And that's the power of freedom. Because once you know you declare yourself, especially in any given moment in time, if I say right now, I'm powerful, I affirm it. It's in my body now. If I say I'm scared, and I keep repeating it, eventually my body's going to respond that way because emotions are chemicals. It's like drinking coffee in the morning. The caffeine wakes you up. The words that you're saying is like literally drinking a coffee. And we have to learn to change our language about who we are. We are melanated people. We have a relationship to the sun. That's a special and beautiful relationship that we should honor in our name. Blackness has nothing to do with that. But we've now formalized around an identity. And while I love the culture and we know what we're saying, but when we get behind closed doors, it's almost impossible to get it together. We fight more than we unite. Now the time is ripe because now everybody sees, wait a minute, this is happening to everybody. The young people have been saying it. They've experienced it. Those of us that are older, we've seen this happen how many times already? And now the time is ripe. I feel like if we started to unite around structures, and one of my visions in my life that I would love before I left this earth plane is to see an African bank open right here in Jersey City. I even have a building ready, right? Why am I saying that? Because we need to start claiming who we are in regards to our nationalities, our economic unions, and our political unions as a people. Malcolm X fought very hard. Hajj Malik Shabazz fought very hard to establish that union between the African American people of the Americas. And mind you, if we talk about Africans in America before Christopher Columbus, which should be a whole nother podcast. But then we're going to say for the Africans that were brought here, 90% were brought to Latin America, mostly Brazil and Cuba, Haiti, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. But there are the African presence is across the entire Western Hemisphere. So let me say it like this. If I am Egyptian, I could possibly be very fair-skinned, have green eyes, and light hair. And I move to Alaska. Guess what I am? African American. Because Egypt is in Africa and Alaska is part of America. And the goal of Pan-Africanism was to unite that identity across the entire Western Hemisphere and to tie it politically to Africa. Now, if Africa's, and I've been reading, there've been African banks opening in Chicago, and with the condition of doing business with Black communities and African descended communities, that's the only way we're going to liberate each other, right? Because the U.S. got this pull in the world, but Africa got all the potential. Right? Imagine if we all got together and developed land in Africa that wasn't developed, and we literally create our own paradises. Right. If we came together, we didn't have to worry about. Somebody please start it so I could move already.
Well, you got to connect with the brother Akon. Akon is already creating his Akon City, and he's working on creating a some kind of he called it the A-coin, which is like a cryptocurrency. Definitely, he's a brother that we have to link up with.
Because that is the motto. And it doesn't have to be a city. It could just be a town.
Right.
And yeah, I'm telling you, I lived in Cuba and $20 fed a family for a month. Yep. In the U.S., we lose $20. We get like a little bit upset, like, dang, I lost $20. Right. And that blows my mind. It blows my mind, the disparity. The disparity is ridiculous, and that these things weren't defined by us either. We didn't come up with the price of money and gold. We didn't come up with that. We need to own it. We need to take charge in our own respective ways. But the fact that a lot of us end up revolving our mind and our spirit around these concepts is what gets us caught up, because that's how leadership gets bought out, right? And we have to develop understanding in our relationships to economy and structure, business, entrepreneurship, establishment, property, trusts, land trusts, international trade, crops, development, sanitation. There's so much that could be done if we all banded together. And my goal is to do so. But I know that here in the U.S., we have to band our bodies together. And most of our Black and brown bodies, a lot of them, especially our warrior class, is found behind bars. Mm-hmm. The United States is 5% of the world's population, but makes up 25% of the world's incarcerated. Wow. In New Jersey alone, we have a higher incarceration rate than any other developed country. Millions of Black and brown bodies are behind bars, right? This is no different than millions of Black and brown bodies being on a field being forced to work. Because when you go behind these bars, you start to find out, especially in the private institutions, that these bodies are in contract with companies like Victoria's Secret, McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, any other major corporation. Even this dude, Bloomberg, just campaigned using prison labor. Because in certain states like Texas and California, you have to work and you do not get paid. That, my friends, is called slavery. Then, if they do pay you, the average rate around the United States of America is 89 cents per day. Now, I might be an inmate who's working for 89 cents a day, making Victoria's Secret underwear, which costs maybe about a nickel, not even, maybe a couple of pennies with the amount of fabric that you're using. And then at the store, it's sold for $35 for a pair of underwear. They literally just made $34 in profit.
Wow.
And it comes from black and brown bodies, right? Now, I'm not going to say that the white population is also very poor if we're speaking in those terms of race. The white population is also poor. There are more poor white people on welfare and social assistance in the United States than there are black and brown combined.
Wow.
But we don't speak about class. And that's what Dr. King did. Dr. King's mission, the Poor People's Campaign, was to try to show that the argument wasn't color. The argument was money and poverty. Poverty is the main indicator and statistic of the ills of a community. And poverty is designed. Poverty, I'm going to say it again. Poverty is designed. It is not real. The thing is that it is a conditioning. There's actual articles you can look up online. People who live in poverty and in need for a certain amount of time, their brain's physiology develop into that of poverty. It becomes a literal mindset. So now understanding that our black and brown bodies are the ones that need to work and to establish economy, but they're found behind bars, making another economy wealthy. And then when they come out into the street and they file an application to work for Victoria's Secret, guess what Victoria's Secret's going to say? You can't work for us, buddy. You have a felony.
Wow.
Slavery never ended. Slavery never ended. If anybody wants to learn about how that worked, watch the movie Lincoln, right? It's with Daniel Day-Lewis. It's a 3-hour-long movie. Watch it so that you have an understanding of the mentality of why these laws were established. And if we look in the United States, the Pledge of Allegiance original salute was the Nazi salute hand in the air. The national anthem talks about how the slave has nowhere to run. The very foundation and the very principles of this country are based in slavery. And it's not slavery color, it's slavery economy. They just keep telling us it's color, and we keep getting stuck in that cycle that we can't prove right, because that concept was invented by German naturalists, men that were scientists that were asking a question. They'll say that was a fair hypothesis. Do people who have different skin colors and look different maybe behave different? Okay, that's a fair question. But guess what? In 2020, with all the science and technology we have, we already know that's not the case. It's already been proven a million times. The fact that we even reference ourselves, or I would say this, to reference yourself, identity-wise, by race makes you a racist. Why do I say that? Because racism is the science of race. We're talking about scientific racism, which was already disproven. If I'm a student of biology, I'm called a biologist. If I'm a student of chemistry, I am now a chemist. If I'm a student of race, I am called a racist. Knowing and understanding that, and it's hard because now imagine I believe like this, and everybody else around me is like black, brown, white, Hispanic. What about? And I feel like I'm in a twilight zone, right? Because we're all having the wrong conversations. That all that energy you just invested into talking about that crap, we could have already done something concrete, something that impacts, something that creates economy. And so now I would say Ava DuVernay has a documentary called The 13th. It's on Netflix. It's now free on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube for free. Very impactful, very broken down and very visually. So that way you can get to learn between connecting the history of then to today and how slavery became the criminalization of black bodies. Because the 13th Amendment said that slavery ended except as punishment for crime. Oh, so it just so happens that the black man is a criminal? Right? So if I get to criminalize the black man, guess what he gets to be? Property in law. That's why when you look at the pictures in the TV shows, on the back of their shirts, it says property of. Property can be sold. I could have an inmate here in Hudson County, and they could be sold to Mercer County. A property can be insured and bonded. That's why they have bonds bailsmen. Slavery never ended. And the fight for our economy is really about the fight first to liberate the black and brown body from behind bars. And when we look at the statistics of black and brown men and women behind bars, we start to see that a lot of it revolves around the drug economy. And then you start to see that the drug economy leads to the plague of addiction. And then you start to realize that if you study emotional intelligence, I don't know if anybody knew this, that the chemical composition for heroin is similar in structure to sadness. And when a person can't process their sadness or their grief, most addicts that I meet that are heroin addicts suffer from grief. It allows them to go to this place that they couldn't go to naturally. The same way a baby cries and needs its security blanket. We have a traumatized population for generations who were taught to hide their emotion because if you showed emotion, you were weak to the oppressor. Our men grew up hard and strong and had to carry all this weight and never show emotion. How are we supposed to have healthy families? How are we supposed to be happy, wealthy, have family, have success, have empowerment, have love? All of those things are feelings. And if I can't learn to develop my feeling, then of course I'm going to try to grab something in the external environment that at least takes me there for a little bit, just a little bit. And an entire structure has been developed around our need for healing. Because I do this, I've spoken in front of Passaic County, all of the licensed therapists, all of the therapists. I'm standing in front of all of them and I said, what's the difference between a feeling and an emotion? And not one of them could answer me. And none of them can answer me. And I think that's funny because when people try to define it, I say, show it to me. Where's the mind? Can you open up your body and show me the mind? No. So you mean to tell me there is a multi-billion-dollar industry based on an imaginary concept? The construct of mental health? Where's the mind? And they're all strategizing around it. But at the end of the day, we don't talk about spirit and the quality of energy that you can hold in your body. Something that I do, if I'm when I go into the prison and I'm there with the inmates, the one thing that I know that they need the most is love, right? So right before I go through the door, I do a little prayer to myself. I get my energy up. And when I walk in the room, I go around the circle and I shake all their hands. And as I'm shaking their hand, I take all my love and all my energy and I put it into the palm of my hand. So when I shake their hand, they receive it. That room, by the end of me shaking everyone's hand, everyone's ready to listen because all I did was give them what they wanted. Love. Shit, it's free for me. It doesn't cost me anything to love. I love to love. It's the best feeling in the world. But if we don't learn those structures and those approaches, we don't learn to eliminate these constructs of identities that they've given us that make us see that identity before we see each other's spirit, then we can't have any other conversations because they're always going to be circular. And I know all of y'all have had the experience where you went around in circles for hours with people trying to convince them of something, and now you're completely tired. Guess what? You just lost all that energy. You don't get that back. You don't get that back, right? We have to learn how to invest our energy into people. And the way you know how to invest is when you leave an interaction that it feels good in your body. If you walk away from someone and you don't feel good, you feel either worried or sad or depressed or anxious, then you need to learn that maybe the energy you were getting from that person wasn't supposed to be.
Right.
Our bodies tell us what to do. And for our bodies to fail on us because we say we're black, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That we need this. When I learned this, I said, we need to move on this now. Like, is everybody reading this too? Like, we need to do this now because if that's the answer, it's in my mind and it's in my heart. What couldn't we get done? You know, we're behind we're behind the starting line just because of the fact that we haven't realized these things. And the moment we take charge of our emotional and spiritual and mental bodies, the body will follow. You would stand in the face of death and nothing would stop you. But we need to learn how to be empowered in that fashion. So now I was able to motivate the inmates, and we said, I don't like calling them that. I'm trying to change the vocabulary myself because I hear it all the time, and I don't like calling them that because that's not what they are, right? And when I built with them about it, and I showed them, I get to show them movies in the jail sometimes if it pertains to my curriculum. I showed them the 13th, and they were very angry because imagine being in that position and then learning you're a slave. This is what they said to Frederick Douglass. They didn't want them to learn that they were a slave. So now that they learned, now they were upset and now they wanted to do something about it. So I said, what if I write a petition to our local officials to see if we can push to amend the 13th Amendment to get rid of that those stupid little words that they have, and they're talking about slavery should be an exception as punishment for crime. See, because now if we get rid of that clause, they can't criminalize our bodies and they can't take our labor. See, because now it's not going to make them money. And that's where you got to hit them at, the pockets. The only reason we have mass incarceration in the United States is because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But if we hit the pockets and say it's not going to make you money, then now that system is going to have to figure itself out. But I would also say that on the community end, we need to learn justice. And why do I say that? I got a call from the sisters in Nigeria that the men are very inappropriate and they don't know boundaries. And a woman was raped and murdered inside of a church, right?
Wow.
We talk about those little interactions. You know, I think about, I have a wife and I have daughters and I have a mother. I honor I honor our matriarchy. I bow before it as a man. I respect that. I even say it is above me because I came from it. And the fact that our people can't honor that just goes to show how deep the colonization of the mind is.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to honor our queens in order for us to move forward as men. And the coding that we teach our young ones and the way we talk about women and label them and the way we don't get to learn our own bodies and our own emotions so that we could learn to negotiate in relationships. All of those things take a hold. It's so intersectional. There's so many things that have to get done at the same time. I would say, bottom line, education. And as I educated the inmates and the incarcerated community members, and we wrote the proposal and got it, they accepted it. So come now, November 2020, we will have on the ballot for the state of New Jersey to add the language to the Constitution that says slavery and involuntary servitude are illegal under any circumstances in the state of New Jersey.
Wow.
So mind you, when I learned this and I started telling everybody, you didn't think everybody thought I was crazy?
Absolutely.
I kept pushing. I kept pushing because I knew this was it. This is like computer code. If I put a computer code and one of the lines is incorrect, then my game will glitch or my program will glitch, right? So if I go in and I refix the code, law is code. That's why it's called code of law. Its code is literally computer coding. If I go in there and I delete that part of the coding, the system and the program has to run differently. And we want this system and this program to work with justice, not your form of justice, not that form of justice that came from 1776 and these pseudo concepts of race and dehumanization, but the ones that we know serve humanity. And it is being done around the world. This isn't a utopian ideal. There's other countries in the world that make this happen. And they don't have as much resource and money that we do here in the U.S. So here, the richest country in the world is saying that they can't solve the ills of poverty. They just started a Department of Space Defense that if they took that money and put it into the world market would eliminate hunger. They can't tell me there's no money. They can't tell me that there's no resources because I've already seen all these budgets. Yes, they do. They sit on millions of dollars and they tell me, Mr. Febo, we don't know what to do with the money. There's money. Imagine the black community got a hold of $1 million grant talking about reparations and we linked up with Africa and established an actual financial institution and bridged the two together. What couldn't we get done? Now let's start buying property. Let's buy our blocks back. Let's buy our land back. Let's come together as families and form land trusts and dictate the way that we live. Sure, you go to Williamsburg and Brooklyn, New York, and you go to the Jewish neighborhood and you run a stop sign, the Jewish police will pull you over. Not the cops, not NYPD. Jewish police officers will pull you over. If you get hurt, a Jewish ambulance will show up and they'll take you to a Jewish hospital. And that hospital is part of the conglomerate of hospitals of the city of New York. We don't have that in the black and brown communities. Why? Because we haven't established our own economic independence. The Jews did it. Mind you, every time we do it, it's not that we're incompetent, by the way. I'm not saying that. Of course, they're coming at us hard from every angle and every direction. But I always say this, man, I've sat in these rooms and I feel like we got so much swag and beauty and culture to who we are that when we sit in these rooms, we outshine them every single time. I got my dreadlocks go all the way down to my calves. And I walk into these chambers with these people and they look at, oh my God, you're so amazing. You're so intelligent. That's right. Now, it's not just me. There's all of us. And when we start enacting our voice and our power is when we change, is when we're able to impact. I've been in racist states in a racist neighborhood. I walked into the grocery store and the lady gave me that, when you get that disgust look.
Yeah. Why are you here?
So I went, I got my stuff and I went to the counter and I smiled really big and I said, good evening. How are you? She melted Hi. Complete. Now I walked out that door, and the next person that walks in with dreadlocks, guess what? She's gonna have to think again.
Right.
Maybe he is a good person, right? Back when I was younger, you know me, I'm gonna be like, what? Why are you looking at me like that? What were you? I'm gonna get smart with her, especially as a younger person, because you're older than me.
Right.
And that's why you get caught up, because they're surrounded by lies, and this generation knows it. They're surrounded by lies, and our youth today are more apt to speak out. And they should. And I honor them for that. I'm completely in love with this new generation coming up. I'm in love with them. They're doing it right now. And it is our job as the middle generation, and hopefully a lot of some of the baby boomers are waking up too that are still around. Like, we need to support these young ones, because they're out there on the streets, they're out there protesting, they're out there changing laws, they're out there speaking their hearts. And the more we empower them, the faster we can catalyze our own evolution and growth. Right. And just to show that me by myself being crazy out in these streets talking about slavery still legal, and now I'm able to change the hearts and the minds of people, because I'm bringing you facts and knowledge. It is uncontestable. I can show it to you in the law. And when we speak law, mind you, the legal system of the United States came from the indigenous land here, which was already a contract between Africa and the Americas. Again, that's another podcast, right? Here we're going to say that this is our land, these are our laws, and we need to know them. Not the law they're going to teach you in law school. They don't do that. They don't do that in those buildings. But we have right now the internet. We have access to journals, resources, all kinds of platforms. I mean, even MIT, Harvard, Yale have all these free courses online, Khan Academy, YouTube. There's all this information out there for us to not know. We can't use that excuse anymore. Right now is about getting our minds right and getting our hearts right. Don't go out there and protest in them streets. Don't go out there and express your anger if you don't have a backup plan. See, your bark needs bite, and your bite ain't gonna come alone. They'll smother you real quick. You could be a shining leader, and they say, "Hey, buddy, you want $50,000 a year?" What? Of course, I need it. I'm struggling. I'm about to have a baby.
Right.
Up, took that salary, bro. Bye bye. See you later, leader. Can't talk to you no more because you're gone. Right? That's how strategized we have to be. That in business, it's all about leverage. When you come to the table, if I go to a job interview and the salary range is $30,000 to $40,000 a year, and I sit in front of the interviewer and I say, I really need this job, guess how much they're gonna pay me? $30,000.
Right.
If I come to the table and I'm already employed and I'm an asset to my company, and you're trying to poach me, you're probably gonna go above what you were saying the range was. See, but at the end of the day, couldn't I technically say that I was working for a company and just get my best friend to pick up the phone when they call, right? It's an illusion, right? And because when you understand, I knew it when one of my ex-bosses, when I used to work for people, when I said, what is my title? And he said, oh, you could just make it up. And I said, what? You could do that? And I started reading. I was like, the freedom of now that I run business, yes, I can make up a position right now. I can name it whatever I want. I could put any kind of job duties and responsibilities and attach a salary range to it. A title doesn't mean anything, right? You're just saying you're going to hold certain responsibilities. But here, they pressure us into these systems. We don't understand them. We get intimidated when people start saying big words and throwing around business words, even though we've never took a business class. I've never taken a business class, and I have a successful business. I never took a social work class, and I have a successful business in social work. And I graduated with a degree in humanities, right? So I created my path, and every single one of us can do that. A big problem we do with our youth is we try to get them to box themselves into a concept. Do you want to be a psychologist? Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a lawyer? Nobody says, do you want to be a comedian, musician, doctor, lawyer, filmmaker?
Right.
And when we look at our youth today, that's what they're doing, regardless. Right? So we shouldn't be boxing our youth that way. To all the youth out there, I want you to recognize that you create yourself as you go along. A title is just a word. It does not define you. I don't care if you're the president of the United States. When you fart, it still stinks. And Trump's probably even more than everybody else's. So here we're going to say that you have the ability to create, and that nobody with any title, I don't care if it's the Pope, I don't care if it's a president, I don't care who it is. A Jay-Z can stand right in front of your face. Mind you, I've seen Jay-Z right in front of me, standing right in the same street. And when I looked at him, I was like, wow, he's a human being. He's just a person. It blew my mind. Then I got in the car in a taxi, and on top of the taxi next to me is Jay-Z's face. And I'm cracking up like he's just a person. right? But we idolize people and we take the titles and we surrender our reasoning, our critical thinking. We surrender it because we put the hope that you trust the person enough that they're going to do it for you. And I'm going to say it just like this, it'll never happen that way. People are only going to support you for the most part if there's a benefit there. And what we want to do is create a culture and an openness that allows us to share in every way, shape, and form. It kind of really does reside outside of these languages. And I think it resides in the blending in our own cultural understanding. They don't teach us our histories. And we need to focus on that because when we learn what our ancestors did, we know what we're capable of doing. And we learn from their mistakes and we modify, evolve, and adapt, right? And we're not doing that. Since we don't know our history, we're trying to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot that can be done, and I'm proving it that just by myself and inmates, quote unquote, who nobody would ever think of listening to in politics, especially that they can't vote, got them to listen, got them to stand, and now all the other organizations in New Jersey are starting to stand up, even though 2 years ago everybody said I was crazy, right? Know that it can be done. Whatever you set your heart to. And I get sometimes these wins, like I'll get like this burst of energy with all these ideas, and I a lot of the times feel like that comes from outside of me. And when I hear that, I don't ever dare go against it. I don't care how scared, I don't care how in my mind I get. I know that it came from something beyond me, so that's how I'm gonna move. Right. And every single time I get to the end, I look back and I say, thank you, God. Thank you, universe, for that experience. Because now I'm stronger. And now I don't
Right.
wait for the experience to come to me. I go get it. Right. And that's something that we also need to teach our youth. So I know I've said a lot and it's hard because I could be here all day talking. But I wanted to just condense the message about your humanity, your identity, your voice, your ability to take action, and your ability to have an impact. You have to know that. You were born for a reason. You came to earth. You chose to come here. People are like, my parents, no, you chose as a spirit, you chose to come here because there was something you needed to learn. And
Right.
I believe you even choose your parents, you choose your family because they're going to give you the best, even if it's negative, experiences to evolve your understanding so that you enact your mission in life, right? All of the experiences that we have, especially the negative ones. And one way I tell everyone to beat the depression or the sadness that comes with negative experiences or the anger and frustration that comes with it is to be grateful for them right off the bat. Soon as you feel a negative experience come to you, stop and say, I'm thankful for this experience because it's going to change your tone and the way you're viewing it. When you let stress, anger, and confusion take over your mind and your body, you're not functioning at your highest potential.
You got to be in control. Wow. Fibo, the information you're sharing is so much here that I don't even know where to take it from here. So I have to ask you this question because the listeners are going to want to know, where do you go from here? Like, how can they participate in this efforts? You mentioned the movement that you're trying to create in New Jersey and changing the 13th Amendment. And you mentioned that you work with brothers and sisters in prison, in jails. And how can somebody who is listening join this movement?
Right. So depending on where you live, right? Because here we're working in Jersey, and the reason we had to do 13th per state is because I don't feel confident enough that if we went at the federal level, this racist country would pass it. So we figured that the only way around it was to go through the state levels to the point where we got 33 states. We could force a constitutional convention to the vote. It would be 2/3 of the vote. It would already be, if we get 33 states, we win, basically. It doesn't have to be signed by the executive branch. So Trump wouldn't even have the ability to go near it. So if you're on the state side here in the U.S., the battle would be joining. If you live in New Jersey, Amendment 13 New Jersey on Facebook. You could be anywhere and join that group just so you could see what we're doing. But right now, I'm also coaching the Sisters of Cussy. Called me the next day after I had a conference with them. And the North Carolina sisters are going to start moving in North Carolina. Since we need 33 states, if you live in the United States and you're in a state where you don't know there's a movement, you can start it. Again, I did it myself. You can do it yourself too. You can educate yourself very quickly with referencing the 13th, that documentary, and watching the movie Lincoln. That just makes it very quick and visual for your understanding. Working with our returning population is difficult because here we're really saying, are there enough resources, jobs, employment, and careers? right? And that really comes down to I think we need more entrepreneurship in our community. We need more education around that so that our community can be positioned to have the ability to hire our own and cycle the dollar within our own. That's how we build the economy.
Wow. Yes, this is very, very good. Like I said, the information is just overwhelming, and I'm sure the people that are going to listen to this episode are going to enjoy this episode and just have fun in listening to this. And so, when you're working with the brothers and sisters in prison and in jails, what are they telling you? How can they participate from there?
For the brothers and sisters in jail right now, it's difficult because of the COVID lockdown, right? So right now, I myself am not in the jail, and neither is a lot of the other no social programming, no outside programming is allowed in the buildings because of the COVID lockdown. So it's kind of difficult to get the message out there. The brothers and sisters right now that are incarcerated, don't we speak? We're speaking for them. That's your goal, to speak for them, right? So right now, a
Right.
big part of this battle is also to register to vote, because since this is going to hit the polls in November of 2020 and the people get to vote to add the language to the Constitution, you can't vote unless you're registered, right? So I felt this was another big important point, because now we get to go, when you go to the community, say, hey, buddy, you want to register to vote? We're going to vote for Joe Biden. People were like, get the hell out of here. Well, I got to go register to go do that, to go vote? Nah, it's too much work. I'm not doing that. But now I go to the
Right.
community and I say, yo, we're about to get rid of slavery for real. Like the fight of our ancestors, the Civil War, everything we've done has culminated up to this point. Can you go register to vote? I'm there, Fibo. It's going to be different. So this push is also going to increase voter participation in communities of color, especially woke communities who are on the fence about voting, because now we know we have something to go vote for. I don't really care anything else about anything else going on but that. Because once we get rid of that language, now we have to have another conversation about justice. So get registered to vote, get people to register to vote, and as they're doing so, educate them on what's going on.
Wow. Well, let's talk about something very light before we come close to the end of this episode. And you mentioned that your mother had 5 children, and my understanding is that you also have 5 kids. Were you trying to compete with your mom or
Oh
something?
no, trust me, no. I love my children. It's the biggest joy of my life. I love being a father.
That's amazing. And also at the top of the podcast or somewhere in the middle, you mentioned that your birthday is tomorrow, and so we just want to take this time to wish you a advanced birthday. And any plans for your birthday? What are you gonna do?
Thank you. I don't know. I mean, we're limited on what we can do. I'm just spend time with my family. That they're my gift.
Awesome. That's great. Like I said, this episode is so amazing and I love the episode. And what we are going to do is that because you shared so much information, there's going to be a follow-up to this. And you mentioned some topics along the way, and I've been taking my notes. And what we're going to do, we're probably going to invite you again to come in and talk about Africa and the Americas. And that would be a very good topic as well, because there is unfinished business and we have to continue to educate ourselves. We have to continue to learn about the historical context and why things are the way they are, and what we can do to try to change the next part of the history, the next part of the chapter, what we can do as human beings and what we can do as people of color, and what we can do to be able to combat what is going on with the world today, especially the United States. And that starts with amending the 13th Amendment that you are speaking of. And so, if people are interested in learning more about what they can do in their cities, what they can do in their states, and what they can do to advance this movement, they can always contact you at your IG page, which is Brooklyn Bori, BrookLynBori, one word. Or they can also look you up on Facebook, Dennis Febo. It's Febo. Or they can even look up your company, which is Guazabara Insight LLC. The word is Guazabara Insights LLC, and they should be able to find you. And I really enjoyed the TED talk that you had on the ism of race. And I think, and I encourage everybody to go out there and Google it and get themselves into that and just listen to that TED talk. And I think they can learn a lot. And you also shared with us that starting with the show on Netflix, 13th, which people can have access to right now for free. And also just watching that movie, Lincoln, also is a good way to start and moving toward a solution to this craziness that's happening in this world. Mr. Fibo, do you have any other last minute words that you want to pass on to the listeners or to people that are going to be listening to this podcast?
Yes, I say peace, blessings, love, compassion, empathy. Remember who you are, hold your ground, love each other, speak a lot of positivity to each other. Do it for no reason. Go up to random people and tell them you love them. Go up to random people and tell them that everything's going to be okay. We need a lot of emotional support right now for each other. We can't ignore that. That is our rock, our strength, our connection to our ancestry. With that said, brother, I really appreciate you having me on here. To the listeners, stay strong out there. Good luck with everything. Much love and peace.
There you have it, everybody. If you're listening to this still, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for listening through and through. Make sure if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button so you can get this automatically downloaded the next time new episodes come out. We have a lot more experiences and stories to tell, and I cannot wait to share them with you. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Reviews are always appreciated. Thank you. I appreciate you, and let me know what you think on our Instagram at La Verdad Duele Pod. Our team is here to serve you. We look forward to hearing about your successes, and maybe one day we may invite you to the studio to share. We wish you luck. The La Verdad Duele family has your back. Thank you so much.